name is Lauren Hollows for NOI Education Services, and I am back with Dr. Phil for session number 2. In our first video, we talked all about the defence and the role of defence and some of the history of it. And now we're going to be talking about the current state of play in vet. Sorry, Phil, this is something that I don't ever think I've seen you and caught up with you and not like talked about this particular subject, but we're going to put it out there for the world today. So thoughts on where the vet sector is at now, and I'd be interested to see kind of like a contrast of like what you think, what's one of the things that you think that we are doing right, and then one of the areas where we need to do better. And you kind of like touched on some of those points before, but I'll hand over to you.
Sure. I guess first up, one of the things I see we are doing right in the VT sector is that we are holding on to the true believers, people who really are passionate about VT, who are passionate about providing the best for their students, who are passionate about creating a new world, a better world, an economy that grows and multiplies. Those people are still with the system. Now they're getting fewer and fewer, and of course you're one of them, Lauren, but they're getting fewer and fewer, and we all know each other by name now. But they are still there, they are still pushing, and they are still as passionate and as angry about the system as I am and as you are. That's one of the good things. The second good thing is that because of these people, they're making the system work. And that's the downside. Our biggest problem in the VT system is we've got good people. The system is in such a state that they have to mold and change things and contextualize everything to the needs of the students, and that's hard. People want to be able to run an RTO or to run a private training organization that creates benefits for the students, for the people that come through. They want it easy. I mean, it's facilitating learning. That's translated as making learning easy. But if it's so hard for the instructor to do it, these good people are going to leave. That's the sad thing. The other downside of it is that it's so easy to it's not easy to comply with the rules. If you comply with the rules, you're kept in as a member of the team. You're kept as a member of the club, whether you're good enough or not, whether you can run good training or not, whether or not your students are actually achieving things when they leave your classrooms. You're still there as long as you meet the requirements of the regulator. And that's a problem that we have with the system, is that it's all about regulation as opposed to achieving outcomes that are beneficial to the student, to their potential employers, to their community, to their economy, to the country at large, and I find that rather disappointing. But getting back onto the good side, is that there is a great depth of understanding and knowledge about what good VET looks like, as opposed to what it doesn't look like, and that emboldens, I guess, people to stand up and push back and say, please stop doing this to us. Unfortunately, there's not a real critical mass of that. I've often said, as people will remember, if you don't like the system, tell them no. If you don't like the standards, push them back. If the standards are wrong, push them back to whoever's developed them. Don't accept rubbish. Unfortunately, to be an RTO, sometimes you've got to, and that kind of puts people in a fairly nefarious position where they've got to understand whether or not they want to be right or they want to be happy, because they can't be both.
Do you think that there is a way to set up regulation to facilitate that system, or do you think that it's like, is it a natural output of any system that's regulated that it's going to incentivize compliance over quality? Like I do wonder, I mean, like in the non-accredited space, you know, you see some incredible skills and training, you know, that occur. You know, but obviously, you know, providing that with no assessment, you know, or whatever, like, what's the percent? Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, trying to get that, like your outcomes are definitely less consistent, quite often, like, you know, just depending on like scale and things like that. Is there a way to set up regulation that really does like promote and push and structure that quality in there?
There is actually, and I go back and based on my own history. In the early 90s, I was working in the UK, And we were creating the National Vocational Qualification System under a group called NCVQ, National Council for Vocational Qualification, and that really came out of an industrialisation of the training. I was working for a college, and we'd been given the task of running a project called the was Access to Assessment Initiative, where my job was to help organisations understand the benefits of RPL, of standards, of having competency-based training and all that. And we pushed the educators out and kept saying, you stay over there, we'll provide you with students if we need to, because these people are pretty smart. And some of the big projects I worked on included things like when the coal mines were closing down, entire towns were going to go broke because all the shops were shutting up. People were leaving town. Well, in England, people didn't move around that much to get work, but they were actually out of work. It was industrialised slumization of the country at the time. So we were working with the entire town, helping them develop RPL centres so they could assess the skills and knowledge that people had and enable them to go on and get further qualifications or actually start up new industries in the region. Massive successes we had with that. We tried to get in Australia and it worked really well. The problem was we were working to apply these ideas that the regulator, the NCVQ, had come up with. And we kept saying, well, you tell us what to do and we'll do it. And they kept saying, no, we can't tell you what to do. You figure it out and we'll approve it. And we were, this is stupid. So most of my first year was just spent, doing trial and error based on certainly understanding what assessment was about and competency-based training was about, but trying it out with people. And we started to get successes that way, and we were working very well. Flip forward a few years, come to Australia, and I am part of the regulator. I'm now with the National Training Board, working with the industries and competency standards bodies and groups saying, this is what we need. You guys go away and figure it out and you make it happen. And I kept saying, well, I've had experience that I can give you all advice and guidance that I can, and I'll help you along the way, but you have to develop it. And the people I work with, ironically, include the assessor and workplace trainers, defence, small business, security, and all of them, Chubb Industries. Some of them come up with some really, really brilliant competency-based approaches, and I still flag them to this day. Others, however, didn't. And what happened is we ended up with my sector come out really good, but we had another few sectors and they didn't. But they had the board had to accept what they were doing because their industry was telling them this is what we want. Fly it forward a bit further. I'm working for the Australian Council, the ACCI, Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the national body. Now we're responsible for a whole range of industries. We get the information coming down from the standards body saying these are the new training packages. What do you think of it? They would go out to the industry. The industry would look at them and come back with their advice and guidance, and this is what we want to change. The unfortunate thing is that they didn't. Industry didn't do anything. So what we ended up with was exactly what we had when I was at the National Training Board, and exactly what we had in the UK. Ideas that come out of a small committee that got together over a big jug of coffee and thought about this stuff and said, well, we think it's okay. The rest of the world will just have to follow us. That's the unfortunate thing. What is good, though, and to get back to your question of what can be done to improve the whole regulatory issues, is that critical mass that I spoke of before, is that people like you and me and trainers and assessors really getting to understand what VET is, become more skilled in the subject about which we preach, in the industry in which we work, and know and understand it, and then become that critical mass. Because you remember, you would have gone to as many of these workshops from these industry standards groups as I have, where they've stood up there and said, this is what we're going to do, folks. Okay, ticked off. Then they go to the regulator and say, well, we had 250 people at that town hall, therefore we got 250 signatures. Well, no, you didn't. You might have had one person down the front who nodded their head. The other 249 said, look, you're going to do it to us anyway. We're here to listen to what you're going to do. And that happens time after time after time. If that 250 people stood up and said no, that industry standards body would have to walk away and say, phew, we're not getting their support. Therefore, we're not going to get funded by the government. Therefore, we're out of a job. Can you imagine what would happen if, say, KPMG, massive group, have all these contracts to develop standards and competency-based processes and all assessment like that? What happens if one of the trainers and assessors stood up and said, no, what you're doing is rubbish?
I mean, this is like the training packages are definitely so there's such a large part of both the problem and the solution in my mind.
Mm.
And I fully recognize all the challenges, and I do wonder if maybe I guess kind of the insurance slash, you know, workers' comp kind of issues is one of the things that plays into it, because, if I had my way in a lot of training packages, I would strip them back so
Mm.
substantial. Like, I would probably slash every single unit of competency by half.
Absolutely.
Because there is so much duplication, there is so much, there's in many of the training packages, there is far too much theory. To me, you should be looking at maybe a third of the
Yeah.
unit should be theory and 2/3 of the unit needs to be skill based. And yet what we see in several of the training packages is almost the opposite of that. It's like,
Mm.
here's your performance evidence, and then here's your knowledge list, which is
Mm.
like 5 times longer than your
Yeah.
performance evidence list.
Yeah.
But, I look at it and I go, do they hand over these training packages and go, well, unless I'm making them bigger, I'm not doing my job? Is
Yeah.
it like, what's the framework for, because if somebody gives me a unit, a qualification, a training package to fix,
Mm.
I'll fix it, but I can guarantee you it's going to be a third of the freaking size after you've given it to me.
I understand,
Because
totally understand.
just realistically, it's it doesn't make sense. The vast majority of units are delivered as part of a skill set
Yeah.
or a qualification.
Mm.
To say we've got to build them all out so that they
Mm.
could be delivered in a standalone context. It's
Yeah.
like, no, just if you don't include all of the communication and the WHS
Mm.
stuff and the and the work effectively stuff into every single unit. If you really feel that they need to have it, set it as a prereq, by all means. If that's what you want to do, set it as a prereq. But
Yeah.
please
Totally understand.
don't include the same content in every single unit. In hospitality, every unit has
Yeah.
hygiene, every unit has this, and it's like, just make it a prerequisite. And some of the times they have made it a prerequisite and they've still put in questions about, do you know the legislation? Tell me about how you wash your hands. Tell me about how you do this. It's like, guys, it's too much.
Mm.
Can they cook a fish? Get them to
Yeah.
focus on being able to cook a fish
Well,
rather than all this other stuff.
yeah, the problem with that, and I've heard this time after time, is the regulator will come in and say, did you do it according to the training package? And then they will go away and say, well, no, you're non-compliant because yes, okay, you did in the other course, but they didn't do it here, therefore you're non-compliant. But let me tell you about training packages for a moment. When I left the National Training Board, I was approached by a person by the name of Colin Dobie. Brilliant guy, this guy. He was the president of the Institute of Project Management. Now, project management was one of my portfolios, and I'd worked very closely with the Institute to develop the competency standards for project management, and they were world-beating. The rest of the world's caught up with us now. They've adopted them. That's great, but they were world-beating at the time. And he said to me, Phil, come on, you keep on talking about this competency-based training, about taking standards and developing training around them. Well, come and put your skills where your mouth is and write these courses for me. So I did. And I worked with some experts, and we developed what became the first set of training packages, the Cert 4 Diploma and Advanced Diploma in Project Management. Now, together, the standards were written in such a way that you had the standards, you had a page saying, okay, what evidence are you providing to show your skills against them? And that was a very small document, very small document. The rest was the underpinning knowledge saying, okay, this is you got the standards there, so this is what it means, this is how you apply it, blah, blah, blah. So the actual training page was probably about that thick entirely. And I still had some friends, when the National Training Board closed, a lot of the guys from there went to Brisbane to work with ANTA, the Australian National Training Authority, the predecessor, whatever of ASQA. And a couple of guys, Peter Hannigan and Andre Lewis, still good friends now. I went to and said, hey, this is what I've been doing. They, a bit of a catch up, and said, oh, this is wonderful. Andre said, can I just take those and show them to some of these other people around here? And he did. And a few weeks later, I got this phone call saying, watch the national papers. I said, what for? He said, I can't say, just watch. Next thing out comes this ad for people to write training packages. And I said, is this what you're talking? I rang him up and said, is this what you're talking? He said, yeah, they like your product. We want every industry to adopt that same approach. So great, wonderful. So I put in and quickly wrote off an application to get this job. I didn't get it. Which is a shame, because about a year later on, I was in Brisbane again. I dropped in to see Andre, and around his wall were all these folders stacked up end on end around the wall. I said, "What's that?" He said, "They're the training pages people have written. We don't know what to do with them. They look nothing like yours. What they look like is the applications for accreditation that we used to use back in the 80s and 90s to get courses accredited. All they were was just all that meaningless bump, like nominal hours and how hard a job would be to do this job. They were job task profiles. They were almost like a HR recruiting booklet. And there's things in the back here. All we've done is take the competency standards and thrown them in there without contextualizing it. He said, "We don't know what to do with them. We'll have to figure out something." And a little while after that, then they started saying, "Well, these things are pouring in, so we better start saying that's it." This is the problem. It's a critical mass of people who were used to writing things the old way rather than the new way. And that's what's happened, is they looked at one set of competence, one set of training packages, a Cert 4 diploma, advanced diploma in project management, and said, well, that's one idea. That can't be good because all this other 150 are written differently, so we'll throw that out. Downside was we used the project management way I'd written it for a number of years, and Collins Company made very, very great deal of profit. I then went on to teach it distance learning through the University of New England. The company there was about to go broke. A year later, they made over $3 million in profit. And other people I was run this course for, that immensely successful program, immensely successful, because it's simple. The competency standards are very, very clear. And the whole idea is that someone does not get marked off competent until their manager says so. Not the trainer, the manager, because they're achieving objectives that make the manager look good. If the manager looks good, then his boss is going to smile favorably on him or her. Promotion, pay rises, performance appraisal, all that sort of stuff. That's the idea of a competency-based process that's actually achieved stuff in the workplace. Unfortunately, the 150 are all about qualifications.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the problem with training packages.
Yeah, it is. And I don't know what the solution is to that one. I think, that's definitely something that we've just seen for years and years, and they just continue to get bigger and bigger. And there was that push there, God, I don't know how long it was, must be 7 or 8 years ago now, to kind of do the streamline, like everyone was supposed to streamline their unit.
And how much changed?
And have they been streamlined? No, they have not. They've gotten bigger.
They
just continue to get bigger.
Yeah.
So anyone who's writing training pack, honestly, seriously, if you are watching this and you are in charge of writing a training package, please contact me or Phil and talk to us, because I will happily go through and edit the F out of your training package to make it work.
The wonderful thing, though, I mean, this comes back to what I was saying before about the regulator and the RTO relationship. If sufficient people were to do the right thing, then the regulator has got to listen, because they don't say you will do it according to that. They say, and you look at all the regulations, they don't specify how competency standards will be written. They say competency standards. They don't specify how competency-based assessments to be conducted, say assessment of competence. Now, if we were to come back and say, okay, this is how we prefer to do assessment. And you look at Wendy Cato, for example. She is pulling her hair out day after day about RPL and how it's being done so bad. She does it really well. She understands. Now, if we could get the world to understand what she understands, RPL and assessment would be wonderful. If we could get people to understand how competency standards are supposed to be written, like you understand and I understand, training packages would not be an issue at all. And the regulators would have to say, okay, we're happy with that. And they would be. Regulators are not there to regulate what they think is a good idea. They regulate what is a common idea. And like all good politicians, they won't tell you what you ought to do unless they know everyone's already doing it.
I've had circumstances where, for example, we've seen something in the training package that is, like I've worked with, the biggest telco provider in the country, and we went to them and went, look, you've stuffed up on your training package. You've mentioned this, this, and this, and actually it should be this, this, and this. And we got that in writing from the telco authorities. So when we were regulated on a particular unit, NASPA went, well, how come you haven't covered this? And we've gone, here's the letter from the thing saying it's not appropriate, it's not, it's not relevant, it's the wrong piece of equipment, yada, yada, yada. And it was, we've done the same thing with, construction and civil and things like that. And I know that there's a similar issue at the moment in like I think it's the PUA training package. It's got a requirement in several of the units to be observed on a live fire site. And the last thing that you want on a live fire site is a trainer going around with a keyboard going, yes, now I know that house is on fire, but if I can just observe you going in one time, because I didn't quite get that, So, I know that, like, Stephanie and I had a few laughs on that one before.
We had the same issue with the national fire standards back in the day. And there was, because we had representatives from everywhere, from every country fire authority, every rural, every metropolitan group, all together, we all work together. Unions love what we're doing. I should mention that. And unions have always loved competency-based training assessment.
Yeah.
That's a misnomer.
They do all of their own non-accredited stuff now. That's all very competency-based.
Absolutely. And I said this to one group. It was up at Cockatoo Island or Garden Island or somewhere up there. It was the workforce there. We had the employers at one end of the table, the unions at the other, and they were glaring daggers at each other. And I thought, what am I going to say here? So I said, righto, employers, you adopt this process and you can build your workforce exponentially. Career development, achieving organization goals and objectives. You'll be able to build your economy, build your business much better, much easier if you adopt these standards. Of course, the union guy piped up and said, yeah, but they're going to get rid of us. I turned around and said, okay, let's put it this way. If they shut the company down and the company has adopted the competency-based approach, your guys will be the cream of the pick when it comes to reemployment. These guys will be better skilled than anybody else. They'll be looked on more favorably in the jobs market because they'll have higher skills. And the union guy looked at me and said, when do we start? Now, that's the issue with the whole thing. The whole process is brilliant if you do it properly. It's not you can't just throw a qualification out there and say, well, everyone's going to be happy with it. And as you said, the unions are behind what they're doing. Now, with the fire standards group, excuse me, we had one group. So there was a massive fire outside Sydney, and it was around Holsworthy or Liverpool, something. This is back in the 90s. And it was on the television everywhere, and they had a lot of country fire groups up there fighting fires in the middle of Sydney. Now, after that was all over, about a month or so after it was over, and we had a big discussion again, and then there's something come up about the standards, and the metropolitan guys saying, oh no, it's got to be different for the country as it is here, because the country guys can't fight rural fires. I can't fight structural fires. And we said, go and look at the Channel 9 news feed. It will show you them doing a very, very good job of fighting these fires. The evidence was there. Now, if the evidence can be shown to be better than what the standards say, let's go with the evidence. If the standards are wrong and they are not describing what is actually required in the workplace, why do we keep on pushing them into the qualifications? What is the point? The point is that the whole system, and I know this is a point for later, the whole system is degraded back to what it used to be pre-1990. It's just got a few new acronyms. It's the only difference.
Well, that's a good point to stop then, because we are going to get onto this cycle of regulation that we are going through yet again in just a moment. Guys, if you want to follow Phil, he does post up on LinkedIn. I will make sure that is linked in the bio below. If you do want to, please comment, like, subscribe, all of those good things. If you do disagree, feel free to duke it out, but do so respectfully. Otherwise, thank you very much, and come back and join us for one more round with Dr. Phil. My name is Lauren Hollis from NOI Education Services.